Welcome back to KOTN Late Night here on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis wrapping up the best of Northern college football, plus a little bit of whatever else is going on. But we just had a Northern banger wrap up, Landis. I am in a Notre Dame area hotel room. I was at the Notre Dame-Virginia game today, Landis, and I am seeping with vibes. Oozing. I got so many vibes. So there's a lot of vibe stuff with Notre Dame that I want to talk about. And it is interesting it's like you go there and it's like, it took a while to drive there. And it's like, Notre Dame does a great job. Like, it was very easy to get in and get out. The chicken fingers and the press box were lovely. But then it's like, well, what's the point of going? And then it's like, by the end of the night, I was like, I absorbed a lot and I have Notre Dame thoughts. And that's why you go to games.
That is why you go to games, for the vibes. I think there's something different too about getting to watch a team in person, right? It's great to be able to watch 15 games throughout the day on television. But I even thought that, like, when I went to Bloomington last weekend, just like it was a very different perspective on Indiana football being there in the building, and Michigan football, frankly, for just being there, getting to see them a little more close up. Yeah.
No, Josh in here is saying that Virginia is a terrible team. They kind of are. They also beat Pitt last week. And so, like, it's the sport is weird. I didn't go to Notre Dame today because I thought Notre Dame had any chance of losing to Virginia. They were a 22.5-point favorite. And by the way, Virginia's backup scored so that Notre Dame didn't cover as one of my best bets. But anyway, It's because I wanted eyeballs on what is very, very likely a playoff team. And there was something specific that happened there that I want to talk about. So we'll get into that. We'll get into Ohio State, Penn State, Colorado. Again, just like handling business. The Big 12 got a little interesting today in a way that I didn't expect, because there's something happening there that I sort of had pushed to the side. But we want to start with Oregon, Wisconsin. Escapes, survives. What's your preferred verb for what Oregon did in Madison?
Yeah, I think survives, maybe. I don't know. They're kind of interchangeable for me. Yeah, I think, like, certainly not a well-played game from Oregon. I told you kind of checked in with me on what I thought about the beginning of the game as you were catching up on it. And I said it looked like Oregon was playing its 8th game in 8 days. Or not 8 days. That'd be something. 8th game in 8 weeks. Just not a lot of juice, little flat. Like, not Dylan Gabriel's best game. There were times where Wisconsin was really moving the ball against Oregon's defense. So we've kind of seen every power in the country do this, right? And it just kind of, I guess it was Oregon's turn to turn in a performance like this.
Derry notes that Oregon flexed their resiliency, which is the verbiage of choice depending on what conference you're in and what team you are. We both thought this would be a little like an Oregon sit-on-them game a little bit. Like, in retrospect, first of all, I don't know the ins and outs of how this wound up being Oregon's schedule, but they played their 3 non-conference games, had a week off, had their bye week in week 4, and then played 8 straight Big Ten games, 4 on the road, 4 at home. And now they have a bye week, and then they play their rivalry game with Washington to end the year. That probably maybe should have been even more of a big deal. Maybe all the Oregon reporters were talking about it a ton. But that is weird, isn't, like, that's unusual, especially now. Maybe it's not unusual, but it's unusual in a 2-bye year, which this season is.
It is unusual, and I am also generally not in favor of giving teams off in, like, the penultimate regular season weekend. I thought that to me also is kind of strange. Like, you get a week off to tune up for your last end of year, in the Oregon's case, rivalry game kind of situation. Like that to me is also odd. I don't know. I get, maybe it had to work out this way with how the calendar broke, but as I said during the week, like, this is, I believe I'm correct when I say that Oregon was the only team that has played every week over the last 8 weeks. Everyone else, there were teams that have played like 7 times, but they had breaks in between. Some only played 6 times over the last 8 weeks. So an odd situation for Oregon, but I think you definitely saw them bearing the brunt of that in this game.
So part of what your point that you said is that almost everybody else has had a game like this. Georgia had a game like this against Kentucky, a worse version of it, like in week 3 or whatever. But so things that matter, right? Jordan Birch didn't play after he had come back last week and played to the extent that they snapped him a fake punt. but their dominant defensive end that they had been winning without once again was out. And that matters, right? When Jordan Burch doesn't play, that makes Oregon a little bit not quite as good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they had played a long time without him and were pretty good as it happened. But again, that's like another thing that I feel like does catch up with you. Like you keep trying to play without your best defensive player. Eventually that might look a little weird, and it looked a little weird today.
Yeah. And then, so I was at the Notre Dame game, and then I'm driving to my hotel, and I didn't catch anything late. So Jordan James goes 25 for 121 and a touchdown. Late, I certainly saw plays where it seemed like when it mattered, Jordan James was running people over.
Yeah, and he also should have scored. Like they rolled him down on the drive when Oregon took the lead with the field goal. His knee was close to being down, but it wasn't down. And I guess that's not a reviewable play. You can't advance a team once you rule them down, they were saying on the broadcast. But no, he ran well. I actually didn't think Oregon was blocking it all that well, kind of all game. Like give credit to Wisconsin's defense. And that Wisconsin's defense played really hard in this game. I was pretty impressed with how they came out. But Jordan James was definitely finding some dirty yards there. Ben in the chat says elbow was down. I didn't think his elbow was down. Was it? Okay. I didn't think it was. Either way, yes, he ran very hard. I thought he picked up like Dylan Gabriel not playing his best game, although Dylan Gabriel made some pretty clutch plays too. And the offensive line not having a great game either. And just a kind of a lack of explosiveness, I think, from Oregon throughout the entirety of the game. I think Oregon's longest play might have been like 32 yards or something like that. It was a lot of screens and sideways passing from the Ducks. And I think because like Wisconsin came in with a pretty good plan to try to shut that offense down. Wisconsin, which I think was off, right, the week before, seemed to come in with a pretty good idea of how it wanted to defend Oregon.
Yeah. Hey, Todd's checking in from France. What's up? And then there was so they converted a really key fourth down early in the fourth quarter, and then there was a third down conversion, I think, on their field goal drive where Dylan Gabriel got it running, and just was another reminder. Like Dylan Gabriel, there's times, I call myself out for this. Like I thought some of the Heisman hype around Dylan Gabriel in the preseason was like, I don't know about that, but you can see him in moments. And again, we watch 28 teams. But what he's doing in moments versus some of the younger quarterbacks out there, like he knows exactly what's going to happen. And when he sees, okay, I have an okay pocket, all the routes are to the left side of the field, I see this opening up, I'm going to go get this. He is really good at that. Like you can see speaking of oozing, his experience in big moments sometimes oozes out of him. Now, he's not perfect, and he's thrown a couple goofy picks this year, but he has that running
at the beginning of this game. Yeah.
And so I didn't see that, but like I probably could have guessed that because he's probably thrown a bad pick in 6 out of 11 games so far that you're like, what are you doing there? But when it matters, like he's got point guard vision, and then he has the ability to run, and it's like a get out of jail free card that sometimes we talk a lot about these quarterbacks who run, but sometimes there's some desperation to the way guys run. I feel like there's never desperation to his running, but it's like, oh, you need to cash something on 3rd and 4. Yeah, he got it with his legs. And it's just like, man, that is a good thing to have in the fourth quarter of a tight game on the road.
Yeah, his poise shows up, I think, and it did in this game. That's the value of being the most experienced quarterback in college football, right? Which is what Dylan Gabriel is. Yeah. So even if for the majority of the game, he does. I don't even know he was making bad decisions. I just kind of think he wasn't super crisp, right? So, but when it mattered, he had to be. That was it. A fourth down throw where he like ripped one to Terrence Ferguson. Like it was 4th and 9, and they left the ball in his hands and let him go do it. Like. That was a heck of a throw and a heck of a play on the move to make that in that moment. So like that's the kind of stuff I think you can bank on with Dylan Gabriel and why like Oregon didn't play its best today. Maybe in some respects played poor enough to lose this game. But when it had to make a couple of plays late, like they have the guy, I think, a quarterback who can do it for them.
Yeah. Dan Lanning, the fake field goal at the end, right? So he gets asked about, this good job by the sideline reporter after the game, asking him the right questions about like the fourth down call, early in the fourth quarter, and that's just smart football strategy, low possession game. We feel like we can't just give the ball back there in that situation, and you trust your guys. And as you said, Dylan Gabriel and Terrence Ferguson do that. But then you're kicking a field goal. Now, the field goal to go from a 3-point lead to a 6-point lead is the worst field goal in football.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that because actually, and I think people would even argue that because if it's still 3, the opposing team then can play for 3.
They play for the field goal.
But if you kick it to go up 6, now you increase their aggression to beat you rather than leaving open the window to only tie you and not beat you. But a touchdown still beats you either way. So not kicking a field goal to go from up 3 to up 6, I am generally in favor of that. But as Todd Blackledge made the point on the telecast, if you're going to go, maybe just let Dylan Gabriel do his thing instead of have the holder try to run for it. And Dan Lanning said, we just thought we saw something and we came up a half yard short, and whatever he said, like, yeah, you could second guess that because it didn't work. He has pedaled down Dan Lanning. Last year, it helped them lose to Washington twice. This year, it has worked almost all the time. And I certainly have been like, oh, baby, Dan Lanning. I once upon a time asked if it was possible that Indiana had too much JMU. And then Kurt Signetti got $100 million and won every game he ever coached and shoved that jalapeno mayonnaise popper right up my yin-yang. So no, there's no such thing as too much JMU. Is there such a thing as too much Dan Lanning? Can Dan Lanning be too Dan Lanning? Or like this is what you get and you get the full experience? What did you think of the fake field goal?
Yeah, I'm a little in between on it because one, I'm in favor of being who you are, and that's who Dan Lanning is. To your point, like on the math of it, I don't have much of a issue with trying to win the game there rather than kicking a field goal to keep it a one possession game kind of thing. I guess the other part of my brain thinks though that like I watched Braden Locke for 4 quarters. He was no threat to throw the ball down the field on you. Like he completed 12 of 28 for 96 yards. I think you could have a better feel for this particular game and say to yourself, like, maybe that wasn't the right decision. Just kick the field goal, go up 6. Yes, it puts Wisconsin more in the frame of mind to attack you for a touchdown, but I don't think that Wisconsin was built to attack you for a touchdown in that situation. So it worked out fine. I guess maybe I lean more on stay true to who you are and the math of it makes sense. But time and place, and I think I don't know that Oregon necessarily had to do that there.
Yeah. Do they need that though, especially while Terrence Ferguson's out? Like, do they need to keep putting the pedal down, or can they? Because we talk about stealing, right? Steal possession, search for inches.
Well, Tez Johnson's out. I mean,
who did I say?
You said Terrence Ferguson.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Tez Johnson out. While Tez Johnson is out, that's what I meant. While Tez Johnson is out. Does he would there be a point? Is there a point that Dan Lanning should ever dial it back? Like he gets into a semifinal, he's got all his guys, and he's like, let's just let us be us.
Well, yeah.
That's enough.
I think you have to manage the game. If you're just always going for it, you're not managing the game. You're just by default going for it all the time.
What if it's part of your fundamental identity? What if you're not going for it and your guys look around going like, why aren't we going for it? That's who we are. Because I think 2 rivalry games against Washington last year, and maybe if he had played that differently, maybe Oregon would have played for a national title a year ago.
Yeah, but I bet he would have liked to have the 3 points at the end of the first half last year against Washington. You know what I mean? Like it's time and place. Like understand the flow of the game where you are. Like again, like if you're about it, lean that way, but you don't have to be all the way that way all the time. I don't think so.
Okay. Do you think he's that way all the time too much? Do you think he still has some
probably a little bit
calibrating?
Yeah.
Calibrating. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a light on my face, but it's because I'm right in front of the TV and it's Georgia, Tennessee, and I don't want to turn it off. I can't turn it off completely. What if Tennessee scores 2 touchdowns in the final 9 seconds and I miss it?
They might. Their offense has been so good today. You never know.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's a guy, Colton Bartholomew, who covers Wisconsin for Madison.com, I think, just like does a really good job as like a beat writer who really knows X's and O's and stuff. He tweeted during the game that like he thought in terms of like angles, I think in filling gaps and rallying to the ball and all those kind of things, what you were talking about, that like this was the best Wisconsin defensive performance. How much of this did you think was Wisconsin? Because the thing that we want to be very cognizant of here is, yeah, we get it. Oregon was favored by 14 and they won by 3, but they played 8 straight. And also, like, at various times I've been to varying degrees on the watch out for Camp Randall thing. And then it was like, well, I don't know, maybe that's not a thing anymore. And it's like, nope, it was. Like, Wisconsin again managed to make it a thing because they defensively played really well, right?
Yeah, no, I thought Wisconsin did. Like they were getting behind the line of scrimmage a little bit, which is like you just have not seen teams do against Oregon over this run really since kind of Big Ten play started and Oregon got its offensive line stuff figured out. There have not been a lot of tackles for loss given up. There have been hardly any sacks given up, and Wisconsin got 2 sacks, I think, in this game and 5 tackles for loss. And I thought did a pretty nice job of tackling on a lot of the perimeter stuff that Oregon was trying to do with its passing game. So I don't know. I think that's planned. I think there were some people that I saw tweeting about like the structure, and I'd like this is over my head a little bit, so I'll just kind of repeat what they say. Like the structure of Wisconsin's defense might lend itself to defending Oregon a little better, which I thought was interesting. Some of like that 3 down front, like the 3-3 kind of stuff that Wisconsin does, that Luke Fickell did at Cincinnati. But yeah, they played really well. I thought the corners played well. It was definitely the best defensive performance we've seen from Wisconsin this year. Wisconsin's defense, I think, has been solid for most of the year. It's had a couple of games where it's gotten away from a little bit, but this was Wisconsin off a break, with a lot now to look at from Oregon, and Oregon a little shorthanded on offense without Tej Johnson, without Marcus Harper. So I'm not floored that Wisconsin was able to put forth this kind of defensive effort against Oregon in the current state that it's in, but it was still pretty impressive.
So Wisconsin, right? So I was at the Wisconsin-Alabama game early in the year. They kind of hung with Alabama for a while, and then they put their backup slot corner on Ryan Williams, and it was like, well, that didn't work. But there were chunks of that game where it was like, okay, they're kind of handling this, and they shot themselves in the foot, and their quarterback got hurt. And then for USC, they handled USC for a half on the road. Yeah. And then they got completely blown out in the second half. But I would say those are the 3 most explosive teams they've played is Alabama, USC, and Oregon, because actually probably those are 3 of the more explosive teams in the entire country. And like they hung around to varying degrees. And then this is one of those, and it's a conversation I want to have about Pitt too. Like, so like the corner blitz, was it Xavier Lucas, the corner blitz on 3rd down in the 4th quarter that he came in, broke down, didn't let Dylan Gabriel get outside the pocket, and kind of like square danced with him until they managed to tackle him. And it was like, that was an excellent call, an excellent execution by them in a key moment. Tip of the hat to Wisconsin. There's some stuff they're doing. And then on offense, they're playing their backup quarterback. And then Will Pauling got hurt in this game, right? Their best receiver got hurt. And Ches Malusi, who like began the year as their best running back, like isn't there anymore. And like we know they've been finding guys to fill in. But if there's been some frustration with Wisconsin, understandably, when the defense plays well, and it's like, oh, if they had a quarterback, it's like, well, it's their backup quarterback. And next year, like they're grooming their next quarterback, maybe Matoyer, who they decided not to go to this year. And you understand why. How much do you not hold it against a team when they're on their backup quarterback? Because it's especially in a transfer portal era, it's harder to have a good backup quarterback. And actually, Braden Locke then played last year. Like he's okay for a backup quarterback, but he's still a backup quarterback. So I fish people in the chat correctly saying if Wisconsin had a quarterback, they might have won this game. It's like, well, they had a quarterback from Miami, and he got hurt for the year. So I would like there to be some hope for Wisconsin fans in a game like this, because you saw one good side of the ball, and you also know why the other side of the ball is what it is right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't disagree with any of that. Like there has to be a little bit of, I don't know, patience or grace or whatever you want to call it with what this offense is right now, based on the fact that it doesn't have a QB1, and it's just kind of trying to get by with that, and also probably isn't quite where it wants to be at receiver. either with some of the injuries it's endured throughout the season, and also like it's a little short. It's more shorthanded at running back even than I thought it was going to be. And like I like Tyree Walker a lot. I thought he had a pretty good game, or at least had some really good moments. He finished with 97 rushing yards. I still think like I don't know if Wisconsin's trying to play like in a phone booth against Oregon for the entirety of the game, I guess that's not going to end up very well. I think like 28 pass attempts for Braden Locke is probably too much. So like I still think maybe they don't call/manage the game well enough, knowing that they have their backup quarterback in there. Like they had that one scoring drive that unfortunately for Wisconsin ended in a field goal where they ran the ball like 13 times. They marched almost practically the entire length of the field running the ball 13 times. And then I just don't know. I guess you give Oregon some credit for adjusting to that, but I don't know if Wisconsin really like tried to do that again very much. Like this really felt like there was an opportunity there against a worn down defense to control the game a little better. And Wisconsin like wasn't able to sustain it after that one drive.
Yeah. So like we could have we should do the phone booth show, because it's hard when you're in the phone booth, right? That just means to us, right? Like you don't really have explosive players. You're kind of trying to get 4 yards at a time and not really stretching the field horizontally or vertically, right? Am I describing phone booth offense correctly? Because to your point, you're saying Wisconsin, you think maybe needed to open it up a little more than they did today?
No. I don't think Wisconsin. I don't think that Wisconsin and Oregon should play, and that Braden Locke should have as many pass attempts as Dylan Gabriel. And I get that like Wisconsin was down a little bit at the end, so they had to throw it some. But Braden Locke had 28. Dylan Gabriel had 31. Like I actually
thought 28 was too many. Okay.
Yeah, way too many. Yeah. Not well. I guess you got to throw it a little bit, but like he's just not the guy I want throwing the ball 28 times against a good defense. So and he completed 12 of them for 96 yards, and he threw a pick at the end. They got batted down. It wasn't really a bad throw, but yeah, I thought that drive where they were running mid zone the entire time and really gashing Oregon, like that just sort of should have. And I'm not saying like spam the same play over and over again. I realize that football is not that simplistic, but I still think Wisconsin is a little too throw happy at times.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Because like Pitt, wow, I didn't realize, because Pitt and Boston College, just very quickly before we get to Colorado and Penn State and Ohio State and my Notre Dame thoughts. I thought, Boston College, I picked Boston College to beat SMU, and they took them to the wire. They gave them all they could handle, but they also had a situation late in the first half where they got the ball, like they had the ball like at the 15-yard line, and they had Grayson James, the backup quarterback who they went to as a starter because Thomas Castellanos wasn't playing that well, and Thomas Castellanos left the team, and he's been a starter at Florida International before, but he is not a classic drop back passer that you want to chuck it around. They could have kicked a field goal. They could have just run it a couple times and kicked a field goal and tried to go to the half up 17-14. Instead, they threw it in the end zone, got picked off, and then SMU drove down and got a field goal before the end of the half. And I was like, why are you doing that with Grayson James? And why aren't you understanding who you are and accepting who you are and then just trying to run the ball, right? But I think it's very similar to the Wisconsin situation. You know, is it your ideal quarterback situation? No, it's the best you can do right now, but you do other things well to try to win the game. And I guess we're agreeing, like, why do offenses feel like they have to push it sometimes? Iowa State beat Cincinnati. That's a nice home win. Bounce back by Iowa State. 34-17 over Cincinnati. Cincinnati 5-5. Still have a chance to get to a bowl. Still a good season for Cincinnati. But that's a nice bounce back. 8-2 for Iowa State. Right? Like, why did Boston College try to throw the ball in the end zone there? I thought it was crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of wild too. I mean, I don't have a problem with trying to score a touchdown there, but they didn't have to throw it to the end zone there. They could have tried to work it down and running the ball a little bit. And I will while I'm like kind of trashing Braden Locke a little bit, he made an awesome play on a 3rd and 8 and completed a ball to Trechke Kahuna for 12 yards that got called back on what I thought was a terrible chop block call. So it's not like he wasn't out there making plays sometimes when Wisconsin asked him to. My larger point, which has been the point with Wisconsin all season, is that they need to lean into running the ball more and trying to control the game. And I don't love Braden Locke throwing the ball as much as he did, but it's not like he wasn't functional for the entire game. There were moments where he was making a couple of good throws, and he did get screwed on that play where they called the chop block. Yeah,
no, that. And do you, like, if they don't call that and they convert that third down and get a first down and get to move a little bit, because they wound up like it was 3rd 19 practically in their own end zone. They ended up punting, and then that created a good field position that Oregon then kicked the go-ahead field goal on that drive. How do you think the game changes if they don't call that chop block?
Yeah, because they were backed up, and then they got away from their own end zone, or they're somewhat backed up. They were on their 20 or 22-ish. Yeah, I mean, who knows what happens there? You at the very least, you can maybe move it out a little more, and if you have to punt it back, you can flip the field, and Oregon has to drive the entire length of the field on you.
Yeah. So the other quarterback I want to talk about is Pitt had to play its backup quarterback today, Nate Yarnell, because Eli Holstein was out. Do you know how many times Nate Yarnell threw it today?
19.
Speaking of stressing your backup quarterback, 54. I feel like Cade Bell's coming in for a meeting tomorrow with Nardog. Nate Yarnell, the backup quarterback that was actually was in a camp competition, and actually in the spring, people thought he was going to be the starting quarterback. He started the last half of the last season. So he's played at Pitt. 34 of 54 for 350, a touchdown and a pick. They ran it 23 times because 10 of their runs were Nate Yarnell runs for minus 20 yards. So that's a lot of negative stuff. So they were trying to chuck it. They took Clemson to the wire. Clemson wins 24-20 at Pitt on a 50-yard Cade Klubnik draw. Ugh. So this
Brutal.
is one of those. And again, I really want people to enjoy their teams. And it's just a snippet for some Pitt reporters that I follow on Twitter. I just saw them getting a little stuff from some Pitt fans. Pitt fans are mad that Pitt's lost 3 in a row. Well, Pitt's win total this season, the over-under before the season was 5.5. They started 7-0. They had amazing comeback victories against Cincinnati and West Virginia. Then they went to SMU, who currently leads as the only undefeated team in the ACC, and got blitzed at SMU. We've seen teams go on the road this year and get blitzed against a good team, against a top 15 team. Then they came home last week and got hosed by the refs. And if they didn't get hosed, I think they would have beaten Virginia. They're better than Virginia, but that's almost an all officials game. And then they, with their backup quarterback, and by the way, their offensive line is also decimated. Yeah. They played a 4-point game with Clemson. And people are mad at Pitt. And that is the kind of thing that hurts my heart. For fans, I'm not here to just defend Nardog and say, but 7-3 for Pitt right now is actually still a really good season. And I know they've lost 3 in a row, but I don't think Pitt should be I don't think Pitt fans should be going to bed mad at their team. And I hope they're not, because it's ball. But it's the thing that the winding road is Grayson James at Boston College, Nate Yarnell at Pitt, Braden Locke at Wisconsin. That was nobody's plan. And so I think you have to give a little grace to that, because again, why don't you have a backup quarterback? Actually, those are 3 pretty good backup quarterbacks. They've all started before, but they're nobody's plan A. And when you're down to your plan A and you're playing somebody who does have a plan A, you know who's a plan A? Dylan Gabriel. You know who's a plan A? Cade Klubnik. Right? That's the kind of thing. You know who's a plan A? Actually, he wasn't originally, but Kevin Jennings now at SMU, the guy they got to at quarterback. It's really good. I don't want to give backup quarterbacks who are playing a total pass, but you have to take it into consideration. And there was 3 examples today that stood out to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But I also think it's okay with being frustrated by your team being in position to win the game, and then giving up a 50-yard was a 50-yard touchdown run to Cade Klubnik to lose
right up the gut. How did you not tackle that guy?
Yeah. And I think they were blitzing there. They sent 5, I think, and got burned a little bit by that. And then I had maybe a banana angle from the safety as well. So yes. I think I'm more of your point of view, maybe coming into a game, but then once you play to the point where you have a chance to win, and then you kind of blow it the way that Pitt did, I don't know. I would be pretty frustrated by that too.
Yeah, I guess. But then also it's but then Pitt had a chance, and then they actually marched down the field, and then Nate Yarnell kind of missed a throw and got a pick, and that was it. And it's well, if it was Eli Holstein or your starting quarterback, maybe it would have gone differently. Anyway, you want to talk vibes? You want to talk some vibes? Yeah. Let's do a vibe double dip. All right, Georgia beat Tennessee. I didn't bring my cigarettes. I didn't bring my cigarettes for the new $10 million man, but I brought my hat for Kirby. My packing is just, I'm a terrible packer. It's inexcusable. This hat makes me look bald too. I don't even know, like, what is this? Why do I even wear this hat? I did get a haircut. I have a whole thing. You wait till we get to Wednesday for what you're thinking. I got a lot of haircut thoughts. So two things happened. One is the sideline reporter during the Tennessee-Georgia game reported that the benches for Tennessee, where the receivers sit, the heater wasn't working. So then they were getting cold, and so they had to go sit where the running backs sit so they could warm up on the bench. And she preceded that report by saying it's a breezy 55 degrees, and they were cold. And to his credit, Chris Fowler was like, come on, it's 55. And she's like, well, it gets chilly down here. And Chris Fowler was like, he said, there are people up north who are snickering. He said north and snickering. And he said it as I was mid-snicker. I had to snicker in each hand. That's a double fist snicker. 55 and you're freezing? So that made me feel so good because the main thing was that I was at Notre Dame, and in the third quarter, I just took a lap around the whole stadium, and I just soaked it in. And what did I see? I saw stocking hats everywhere. It was beautiful. You know why? Because it was kind of cold. The sun was down. It was November. And they were beating a Southern team, right? Virginia. That's South. That's South enough. It was dark. They do really cool stuff between the third and fourth quarter at Notre Dame Stadium. And everybody was kind of cold. And it was senior day. It was another senior day. Because Notre Dame's next two games are at Yankee Stadium against Army and then at USC. So I was down on the field for the final 5 minutes. And I was watching the fans, and I could hear fans talking to each other, like, season ticket holders who sit near you, like, see you later. Well, maybe see you in December. And they were making plans with each other for a home playoff game. And it was a snapshot, Landis. Southern team, stocking caps, night, cold, South Bend. And then there was a report that Tennessee players think 55 is cold. And I was like, get them up here now. So then I just turned around and started talking to these two fans and just had a 10-minute conversation about which SEC team do we want to see come up and freeze their butts in South Bend. And the one that they brought up, which would be great, which I was not top of mind for me necessarily.
Miami.
Bama.
Oh,
they want Bama revenge for the national title massacre.
Yeah,
in South Bend. How about that? So my vibes. It was playoff vibes in South Bend, and I could see it, I could feel it, and I could see it exactly what it's going to look like and feel like if and when Notre Dame gets a home playoff game in December. And they can't wait, and I can't wait. And Marcus Freeman was getting asked about it after the game, and he was doing one of those well, I don't know. It doesn't matter what I think. We just have to go win. But then he was he got the Grinch smile. And then he did one of those things where he pointed at the reporter who asked him the question, was you're trying to get me. You're trying to get, but they all know it. Everybody on that team knows it. It was goodbye, but it wasn't. And it made me even more excited, Landis. I can't wait. And I think it's going to happen. I think Notre Dame's going to get a home playoff game. And it's going to be an edge for them. It's going to be an edge.
Yeah. Where's Notre Dame at right now? Actually, or the 8th?
I don't even know. I don't even care because it's just about vibes. So this is what I think I am on this. Big Ten 2, the Big Ten title game loser is the 5 or the 6. Indiana could certainly beat Ohio State, but for Indiana's a 10.5-point underdog. So for the moment, let's assume that Ohio State beats Indiana, and let's assume that Penn State wins out and that Notre Dame wins out. I think the Big Ten title game loser is 5 or 6, and I think it's very possible that Penn State's 7 and Notre Dame's 8, and that the SEC title game loser is the alternate 5 or 6 with the Big Ten loser.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And that sounds right, and it sounds delicious.
Yeah,
but like
because
that,
Notre Dame too. Notre Dame's gonna have a chance to get a heck of a win next week against Army too.
Yep.
Like that, which will help them.
I think
yeah,
Notre Dame's
I think
8
so.
right now. By the way, is that right?
Yeah, they are. They are. Just double check. They are 8. I think that's right. I was actually I was listening to Cover 3 during the week, and they do like a Big Ten show on Tuesdays, and they were talking about how like no one other than the Big Ten champ will end up hosting a home playoff game, which I just like. And when I say they, it was just really one guy. It was Tom Fornelli, I think, was like trying to make that point. And the rest of the show, I think, disagreed with him, but I don't think that's the case. Like I think if Notre Dame wins out, and I do think the second Big Ten team are both going to get home games. Maybe we'll see Penn State. I don't know if I'm 100% certain that Penn State would.
But they're 5th. I mean, what are they right now? They're 4th. And if they win out,
yeah, but if they win out, but they're not stacking anything, right? Like Penn State stands a chance to fall, despite the fact that I think it will pretty clearly win out. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all. I guess it would depend on how it actually shakes out. But like the second place team in the SEC the loser of the SEC championship could very well be ahead of Penn State, right? They'll be ahead of Penn State.
Who else? That's what I just said. Big Ten loser, SEC loser, Penn State, Notre Dame are your 4 hosts.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, is SEC
ACC loser
hosted?
What if if SMU doesn't lose again and Miami doesn't lose again, and that's your ACC championship, that loser might be ahead of Penn State.
Yeah, but those teams they're behind Penn State right now. So it's again one of those, like, is that loser? So that loser's already behind them, and now they're going to go lose in the ACC championship game, and that's going to move them up. Like Penn State.
I'm not saying it would. I'm just saying, like, don't be surprised.
And I'm just going by like current playoff rankings. I'm going by current, where they are now, what we think is going to happen. But here's also your mistake. You said you listened to another show. Other shows blow. I realized this week. Everybody else sucks at this besides us. And here's the thing. Here's why everybody else sucks at this. Because we tell people what our focus is. And we are responsible for knowing everything we possibly can about the 28 Power 4 Northern teams that we discuss on this show. And if you think we are factually incorrect or subjectively astray about those teams, we absolutely should hear about it. You need to tell us that, because it is our responsibility to know that stuff. I don't give 2 squirts about South Carolina and Missouri, but we tell you that. So you shouldn't come here for that. But there's every other national show that thinks they know about the Big Ten. You listen to talk about the Big Ten, they don't know crap. They know the SEC and they diddle. Well, the Big Ten, I think Indiana. They don't know anything. So don't listen to those other shows for that stuff. If you want to go hear about Missouri, Arkansas, or South Carolina, Mississippi State, fine, go listen to them. They don't know anything. And the Desmond Howard thing, you saw the Desmond Howard thing today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's an insult. It's an insult to people who care about college football. He acted, so if you guys didn't see it, they were like doing picks on Kansas State, Arizona State, which was a 7-2 versus 7-2 Big 12 playoff eliminator. And he said, I saw this game on the rundown and I wasn't sure why we were picking it. And then he was like, I don't know, Kansas State.
Yeah, the best part is that he was wrong. Yeah.
I mean, he was wrong, hopelessly wrong. We gave you like a good 9 minutes on like what Kansas State, Arizona State was, why it mattered, what the factors were in the game. I really do think there's a lot of shows that claim to be national shows that have it like know 1/3 as much about Northern ball as they do Southern ball, but they claim they're a national show. So like that opinion, and Tom Fornelli can come on here and defend it, it's factually wrong. So don't listen to him. It's your fault. I blame you. Why'd you say?
Sorry, my apologies.
Just listen to us again and again and again. You can I give you permission, listen to us and just fast forward through the parts where I talk.
Just listen to myself. Yeah. I also picked Kansas State, so maybe I shouldn't do that either.
Yeah. It was rough for you because I was all over stuff this week. I don't mean to brag about it.
Mm-hmm.
All over Arizona State, all over Boston College giving SMU a game, right? Knew that. That was 2 things I was all over. But anyway, like I'm just saying, if you guys, we're not going to do it tonight. I'm going to put my hat on again. We're not going to do it tonight. Like, and I tell you, like, there's no, you know what this is. We don't pretend. You're not here for unbiased, in-depth Georgia coverage from this guy. Dog mentality. Doug really knows Georgia ball. He really has some good opinions on Oscar Delp. Of course I don't, but I'm not trying to pretend that I do. I think it's an insult to people who care about Northern ball because I think it happens everywhere. If you really ask somebody to break down like what happened in Oregon, Wisconsin, people are going to be like, oh, Luke Fickell. That's the extent of, they don't even know anything. Am I wrong? Do you disagree? Tell me if you disagree.
No, well, I think I do think it is hard to cover the entire sport and talk about the entire sport intelligently. Yeah.
So why don't you cut it in half and focus on a group that you care about? At least Feinbaum, he's only going to care about the SEC. And I don't even know, like, I don't listen. Like, so then, but then when he's like says stuff about Matt Rule, it makes me mad. It's like, don't talk about Matt Rule because you don't know anything about Matt Rule, right? Everybody should split up. Claim your teams. We have our 28. Claim your teams. Okay. So what was I talking about? I can't remember what I was talking about.
Vibes, playoff vibes, Notre Dame.
So I really do think Notre Dame is in really good position to host. And as we talked about it before, it's like that 8-9 game is going to really swing on who hosts it and who doesn't. But I think Notre Dame in that stadium, here's the thing that happened in that game that was super interesting, was Notre Dame called a fake punt that worked. They said after the game that they had been working on this fake punt since last year's bowl practice, and that they used Jack Kaiser, who is their star linebacker, to kind of sneak in and be under center because he was a triple option quarterback in high school. And there's a reverse pivot involved where he's like a handoff and that he was the guy to do that as Kansas ties BYU at 10. And they did it and it worked, but there was a penalty on it because with the alignment they had the wrong numbered jerseys on the offensive line because instead of a special teams play, when Jack Kaiser then went under center, it went back to being like an offensive play. Is that basically as you understand it? It was basically the jersey numbers.
That was the explanation on the broadcast. I don't know if that's actually what the explanation was to Marcus Freeman, who looked pretty upset by whatever the explanation was. But they said on the broadcast that once that player, I guess like you have to be 10 yards back from the snapper for it to be a kicking formation. And then once you were up under center, like Jack Kaiser was, they just consider it a normal formation. And then the jersey number rule applies to the offensive line, which is between 50 and 79. And they had like 23s and 39s and stuff up there.
Yeah. So Marcus Freeman got really mad, but he said what he was mad about is like he just wanted the interpretation because the way, and he got asked about it a lot after the game, like the way, it's not that they didn't do it wrong. They did what they set out to do and believed that that formation with those numbers and those players in the game was allowable by their interpretation of the rules. So now they would like, and at one point then Marcus Freeman said after the game, like he was just like, fine, we'll discuss it later. But like he like really wanted an explanation. So anyway, this is what happened. So the fake punt doesn't work. It was like a gutsy call, creative call. It doesn't work. They end up punting. Virginia, they hit the punt returner and he fumbles, but Virginia covers it back up. So then Virginia has the ball. And then on like the second play, Notre Dame intercepts a pass and like returns it to the 5 and then punches it in with like a little pop pass. And the stadium had an edge. And the stadium was mad with Marcus Freeman. And then we got into ball don't lie territory with the way that the defense, the special teams then responded, the defense responded, and the offense responded and cashed it in. And there was otherwise I kind of thought it was like, like the game up to that point hadn't been super exciting. It's not that the stadium was dead, but it wasn't this great atmosphere. But that stadium had an edge, and it was cold and it was dark, and there was an edge in that stadium. And it was one of those situations where you could feel the fans and the team like combining forces. And that was when I was like, this is a thing. Like, get Ole Miss up here tomorrow. And I really just felt like that environment. And I asked Marcus about that after a game, and he was like, it's something about that. So that's not rare. If you have a good home environment, that's what happens. But man, like it made the playoff idea like really come alive for me because they backed their coach and they backed their team. And I could see it being really difficult for an SEC team to come up there.
Yeah, I mean, I could too. I was picking up on that a little bit through the television screen. Like just the energy of the crowd, the energy of the stadium, the energy of the team, kind of all a little bit in sync there, as Notre Dame was yet again just kind of like steamrolling over another overmatched opponent. And I think that feeds it too, right? It's like we talked about during the week whether or not Notre Dame has entered machine territory with the way that it is just effectively, or I guess with a high level of execution, really just like running through some overmatched opponents. And this was another example of that today. One of the better examples of that I think we've seen from Notre Dame today. So there's an energy there for sure that I think is interesting if that team gets into a postseason situation, with the way that it plays defense, with the way that it can run the ball, with like Riley Leonard, who's not the world's best thrower, but he's certainly in better form than he was in the beginning of the year, right? Like there's a lot going on there that I don't know that I want to see that team in the first round of the playoffs, especially in South Bend.
And then I thought, again, it came up again because their first home game of the year was the loss to Northern Illinois. And the last home game of the regular season was this, right? And they did a cool thing that I think they let all the students who were seniors on the field after the game, and everybody was like taking pictures and sort of hanging out with the senior football players. And there was like just a great vibe to everything. And again, like sort of a farewell that maybe isn't a farewell, but this was another example. Again, I think like I've said in a lot of ways that I think Penn State is the ultimate example team for the 12-team playoff, but it's starting to make me think that maybe Notre Dame is just as much or even more. And it's because a terrible loss didn't ruin their season. And I really like this idea. They'll let them lose initiative. How far they have come, they wouldn't be in a 4-team playoff mix. It just would be over, right? You can't lose to Northern Illinois and make a 4-team playoff, especially when you're not going to play in a conference championship game. And this is not a conference. Should they be in a conference? Should they play in a conference championship game discussion? But like that they've rebounded from that. They've become a much better team. They've overcome injuries. And then I think for Notre Dame, what is success? Because there felt like a time like Notre Dame was in that second tier. It was a small tier of we can make the playoff, but we really don't have a chance to win a national championship. And that can be a frustrating tier to be in. I would like that to be an exciting tier. I would like that tier to be an upside tier, not a downside tier. I don't think that tier should be defined by not being Alabama. I think that tier should be defined by, man, we're constantly in the mix and having fun. And so, A, Northern Illinois didn't ruin their season. And then B, I think if Notre Dame gets a home playoff game, wins the home playoff game, and is one of the final 8 teams and goes and takes its shot, if they're the 8 seed or the 7 seed, they're going to play the 1 or 2 seed in the next round. Go take your shot. That's a great year.
Yeah.
I think a Notre Dame season where you get a home playoff game and win it is a spectacular year. That's a hang the banner kind of year. We're the 7th best team in the sport, but we've never been that way before. So I'm really excited about what Notre Dame has the potential to show us in this new era.
Yeah, me too. And I think about too how good that'll feel as a Notre Dame fan while Brian Kelly is in the Citrus Bowl or whatever that bowl game's called now.
Our guy Stephen Godfrey tweeted today after that LSU loss, like, I think this LSU loss just shows how much the committee needs to think about a 4-loss team. And a couple people, I think, sent it to me like, get him, Doug. And I was like, he's being sarcastic. He's with us. He knows the deal. But like, he's making fun of the narrative, right? It felt like during the Georgia-Tennessee game, Carson Beck scrambled on a play, and it felt like Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler were like trying to will Carson Beck into being a good player. They were like, that scramble, the toughness on that scramble. I was like, Dylan Gabriel scrambles 6 times a game. Have you seen Avery Johnson scramble? Have you seen Will Howard scramble? Like, what are we doing? We're handing out participation medals because the Georgia quarterback, instead of throwing an interception, scrambled. So here's my Georgia question, and they won. But I am asking this question honestly before we move on to Ohio State, Colorado, and Penn State. I swear this is not a dog mentality question. This is a real question. And I think we need to let this question permeate the discussion. Are we sure Georgia is what happened?
Jake Retzlaff just threw a brutal interception.
Really?
They drove down to the 5. It was an awesome drive, and then he, for no reason, threw a fade to a covered receiver and got picked off in the end zone.
No, the fades, the covered fades. It's one of these things. Fades. Oh my gosh. When it works, right? When it works, it's like it's the most beautiful thing you ever saw. But I feel like it only works like 20% of the time. And the rest of the time, I was like, why did you do that? There were some people running some great red zone stuff today that I was like, man, scoring in the red zone looks easy. Are we sure Georgia's good?
I need more context with that. Like, yes, I think Georgia's good.
Okay.
But
here's my context. What if the second half they played against Alabama when they stormed back and the game they played at Texas when they were mad at the world, what if those are the outliers? And everybody is, because I was like pulling into the hotel and Fowler, to his credit, was pushing back. But Herbie was like 9-3 Georgia. Like they were already getting ready for Georgia to lose at halftime. And Herbie was having the 9-3 Georgia playoff discussion, but it was only schedule related. So when you have a schedule related discussion for a team with losses, you are making the assumption that they're good. And the only reason they have losses is because of their schedule. I would like to refute the assumption because I think it's possible that beating Mississippi State by 10 and looking like a bunch of dorks against Tennessee for a half and beating Kentucky by 1 point and some like instances like that are actually who they are. And then under some circumstances, sometimes they get geared up like Chris Farley.
Mm-hmm.
And they look good for a half. But I think the assumption, like everybody assumes they're good, and the only reason that they have 2 losses and maybe look like they were heading for a third is because of their schedule. I think it's because they're not as good as we think they are. And I would like to have a is Georgia good conversation, not only of course Georgia is good, their losses are only because their schedule is hard discussion, which I feel like is the only discussion people are having.
Yeah, I guess my problem with is Georgia good is that like if my alternative is to say they're bad, like I don't think they're bad. I would not say that Georgia's a bad football team. I think Georgia is not as good as people treat them. But
are you sure that
good.
Georgia is one of the best 12 teams in the country?
Yes.
Okay. Like I'm not sure of that. I think you could put them in a bunch of different conferences, and like I absolutely think it's possible that they're not, with the way their quarterback plays and the lack of explosive playmakers, and that their defense is good but not generational. Like I absolutely think that.
I don't think that there are a lot of teams trotting out what Georgia's trotting out on the defensive line.
Michigan is.
No, it's not. Not like
no.
Michigan's got good defensive linemen. No, they're not the same. Michigan's starting 4 is really good. I'll take Georgia's.
Here, you take the hat then. Here, your hat. Here, you've got dog mentality. Can I shove this hat through the screen? Take your hat. Okay. But like certainly, okay, so I'll be the only person in America having as the Georgia good conversation. All right. Let's talk about 3 Northern teams that handled business today. Let's start with Ohio State at Wrigley Field against Northwestern. It was weird early. It took a while to come around. Northwestern actually played Ohio State kind of toe-to-toe for the first half and then screwed stuff up and kind of handed some stuff to Ohio State. And then Ohio State did its thing in the second half. What did you think of the Buckeyes today?
It was more, I wouldn't even say, I think Ohio State only scored 1 touchdown in the second. Or no, I guess they scored twice in the second half, but only 1 touchdown in the second half. It was like the first quarter, I think, that like Northwestern just like held the ball for a very long time. It was not dissimilar from last week against Purdue, where the opponent snaps the ball with less than 5 seconds on the play clock because it knows that's its only way of trying to keep the game close. And then Ohio State is also perfectly content playing pretty slow. So then you get a low possession first half where Ohio State, I think, only had the ball once in the first quarter. They went down 7-0 and scored 31 straight points. I think Ryan Day was a little frustrated that they didn't punch one more in there in the fourth quarter. Northwestern, I think, expedited the process of Ohio State taking the game over by botching a special teams play that gave Ohio State the ball on the 1. But I also think if they would have gotten that punt off, Ohio State would have driven down and scored anyway. So, it was, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a fine game from Ohio State. I thought the defense was a little hot and cold. Was giving up too many 3rd and longs for sure. I thought that there were some stuff with Ohio State's corners that I think are worth chewing on a little bit as we get closer to the Indiana game. But otherwise, I don't know that I didn't find anything overly concerning about what I saw from Ohio State. And I thought like it looked cool. Like I thought it was a unique setting. Obviously, I had never really watched start to finish a game played in Wrigley Field before. This was only the fourth time I think the Northwestern has done it. I thought it looked awesome. And there were a ton of Ohio State fans there too. It was like you do kind of feel bad for Northwestern that it was a home game for Ohio State, but it's always that case when they play at Ryan Field anyway. So I guess it doesn't make much of a difference. So
same thing happened when Northwestern played Iowa in Wrigley last
year.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like Ohio State's defense was playing a lot of young guys again, especially up front. So I don't know that I take away anything from the defensive performance other than Ohio State's corners got worked when they played Oregon, and I don't know that they've shown a whole lot to say that they're definitely better since then.
Do you think Jermaine Matthews needs to play more for Ohio State in more of maybe a rotation with Davis and Igbinosun and Denzel Burke?
Sure, but I don't think he was much better than those guys today. I think like Denzel Burke and Jermaine Matthews, I thought were leaving guys open, and Davidson Igbinosun can't stop getting defensive pass interference penalties.
Yeah.
So like I don't know that anyone's playing super great in that room right now.
So this 2-week stretch for Ohio State since the Penn State win and now heading into Indiana, Purdue last week, Northwestern this week, you think like they did what they were supposed to do for the most part, or you think there's some things that you have questions about going into the Indiana game?
No, I think more or less Ohio State like handled its business the last 2 weeks. The concern that I have going into Indiana, I don't know there's anything that could have happened in the last 2 weeks that would make me less concerned, right? Because it's a question of when Ohio State plays a team with dynamic receivers, which I think Indiana has, and Oregon definitely has. Are Ohio State's cornerbacks up to that challenge? And the last time they were on the field with a team like that, they weren't. And we'll see if they are this week. But that would not have changed no matter what happened the last 2 weeks against Purdue and Northwestern.
So we will have, just as a heads up to everybody, the Wednesday Kings of the North this week will be almost entirely an Ohio State-Indiana breakdown. So we're even going to move like some of the guests off of that. Stephen Godfrey this week, instead of being on Wednesday, is going to be on Tuesday. So we really can do almost 90 minutes on another top 5 game in the North, and we think it deserves that. And then we can do all the other games on Thursday. So we will get to that. Penn State, 49-10 over Purdue, and they really kind of emptied the bag on Ty Warren. 3 rushes for 63 yards and a touchdown, 8 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown. They had a play where a lot of times when they don't have Drew Aller at quarterback, they split him out wide. So they did that. They put Aller out wide. They put Ty Warren at quarterback. Ty Warren threw a backwards pass to Drew Aller. He then threw a forward pass back to Ty Warren to set up a screen, and he ran like 35 yards. It feels like to me almost like if Penn State had played the way the last 2 weeks, if they would have played that way against Ohio State, I think they might have beaten Ohio State. Like it feels like they were afraid to do things offensively against Ohio State. Now, a lot of that is to Ohio State's credit. It's much easier to do it against Purdue. I understand that. But it felt like they didn't even try, and they admitted that. They didn't try Ty Warren near their goal line. They didn't use Bo Prabula that much. And I feel like the last 2 weeks is what you would want to see from Penn State bouncing back from the Ohio State loss. We kind of said the same thing last week, but today was more of it.
Yeah, I think so. And it's what we've seen a lot from Penn State prior to the Ohio State game. There's a mental block of some kind there when Penn State plays Ohio State that obviously starts with James Franklin and trickles its way down and even seems to impact coordinators who have not been there prior to this year. So I think I said after when Penn State went out and beat Washington the way it did, like that felt a little different to me because typically Penn State doesn't play very well the week after it plays Ohio State, and it played well against Washington. It played well again today, against Purdue. So I think it's okay for that to be encouraging for Penn State fans, but I also get it's like the way the schedule has set up. It's like Penn State's supposed to look like this to close the regular season, and all that matters is if it can look like that when it plays another good team. So I think it's trending in the direction it needs to be trending, but I'm not making any sweeping judgments about where Penn State is until I see it on the field with another competitive team.
It is interesting to me of whether this thing with James Franklin and Penn State, is it a big game thing or is it mostly an Ohio State-Michigan thing? because I don't have the stats in front of me, but like when we talked about it before, it's like, okay, whatever he was 3-17 against whatever teams, it was like, well, like 0-13 of that was against Ohio State, Michigan. So it makes me curious. Again, if Penn State does what it needs to do, it's going to make the playoff. And then will Penn State put its best foot forward if they play Tennessee or Alabama or Ole Miss or Indiana or Notre Dame or somebody who's not Ohio State or Michigan? And
well, it's hard. Like
is yes.
We
I
don't
think
know.
They will. I think
we don't, like, they haven't had to play anyone else other than Ohio State or Michigan because they can't beat Ohio State or Michigan, right? They never put themselves in position to show us that they can do it.
I'll be curious because, like, if it's a big game conversation, Ohio State, they're playing a playoff game, that's a big game. They'll lose the big game because they lose big games. I think what we're agreeing on is that might not exactly be the conversation. We don't know, but I'm not going to assume that they'll turtle in a playoff game just because they do that against Ohio State and Michigan. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Because I think there could be a talent thing there, but I also think that I use the word mental block, which might be exactly right. Colorado, Utah today, like, I was pretty impressed with Utah. They fought much more than I expected.
Brought it, yeah.
And there was whatever, like, an internet thing on Friday that said that Isaac Wilson had mono. And then it was like, well, I guess they're not going to have a quarterback. And then he played and actually probably played the best he's played in 2 months. And Brant Keithy, their great tight end, is out for the year. And they just found another tight end who looked exactly like every other Utah tight end who was making plays. And so Utah came out and kind of did some stuff. And then, oh, by the way, Colorado still smothered them and won 49-24. So I thought it was like a slow start for Colorado, but I wound up being, I think, more impressed because Utah really did kind of hang around at least a little bit. They were never like, they got down 14-3 and never like cut it within 10 points, but like another good Colorado win. Like, was that your takeaway?
I think that's the best defense in the Big 12, Utah, right? Who would you say definitely in the Big 12 has a better defense than Utah?
I mean, BYU's is pretty good, but I would probably say Utah still. And I think that people have been making that point again. It's enough. I mean, I should have thrown Utah into the Pitt, Boston College, Wisconsin conversation of whatever you think about Utah. People know it more because Cam Rising's out, but like, it's all backup quarterback. And it's another team that you'd say, man, if you had a quarterback, it's like, well, they do have a quarterback. He's just hurt again. So yeah, I won't disagree with the idea Utah's the best defense.
Yeah. So then if that's the case, and I think it is, like, I thought we got a pretty impressive game out of Colorado. Like, it had to. There were times where it really just felt like Shedeur Sanders was again like screening a team to death, but then he ripped a couple of throws. He had a 4th down throw to Travis Hunter that it was more insane about the catch that Travis Hunter made because it was Travis Hunter and 4 defenders in the general area and 2 like basically right at the ball, and he would just went over everybody and caught it. And I was like, okay, what are you going to do, Utah, kind of thing. But then the touchdown pass to Draylon Miller was like a really exciting run after the catch. That was first a ball that Shedeur I thought really ripped down the seam there. So you saw a lot of good from Shedeur. The couple of times where Colorado had to run the ball, had a couple opportunistic runs, had one long touchdown run in that game. So I thought it was a pretty impressive showing from Colorado's offense. And then also, I know Utah ends up putting up 24 points, and there were a couple of drives there where Isaac Wilson and the tight ends were like playing really well. But I also thought you saw still Colorado's defense like flying around, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, like kind of really closed the door on any idea of Utah making it a game, like kind of like third quarter, fourth quarter-ish by getting after Isaac Wilson a little bit. So I don't know that Colorado's defense is so good that it's just going to like go out there and smother a team and keep them out of the end zone kind of thing. But I think it was a continuation of some pretty encouraging progress from Colorado's defense, and then the offense finding a pretty good gear in probably the most difficult matchup it's had so far this year.
Carson Ryan was the Utah tight end who was like, okay, they have another one, 4 catches for 78. Yes, Isaac Wilson had a good game compared to what he'd been doing. It's still only 21 of 40 for 236, and he did throw 3 picks. But like they had some life to him. Like, I want to give Utah, who's now 4-6, credit for having some life when I thought maybe they would have been done. But they ran it 30 times for 31 yards. So like they had no run game because like the passing game is not scaring anybody. So the thing for Colorado,
part of that Utah offense that like has at times looked kind of functional, and like that Colorado kind of took that away. I thought was actually impressive. One other thing, just like to give Utah some the touchdown pass that Isaac Wilson threw to Dorian Singer against Travis Hunter, which was the first touchdown that Travis Hunter has given up all year. That was a heck of a throw. It was a really good throw and catch. So
So the Big 12 is going to get interesting next week because we were doing a lot of stuff based on records, and now all of a sudden it felt like, like BYU and Colorado really might be in position to like just kind of cruise their way into the Big 12 title game. Colorado is at Kansas next week, and Kansas is giving BYU a game right now, and BYU plays Arizona State next week. And Arizona State won the Desmond Howard showdown against Kansas State by jumping out 24-0 and then hanging on. And the thing, Landis, about the Big 12 is like I have been in assumption Northern Big 12 title game for 2 months. Whether you thought that was going to be BYU Kansas State or BYU Iowa State or Kansas State Iowa State or here comes Colorado. At the beginning of the year, you thought like Utah and Kansas were going to be in that. So the teams have changed, but the Big 12 is half Northern teams and half Southern teams. And the Southern teams have been a non-factor, and Arizona State's a factor now. So they played really well today, Sam Levitt and Cam Scatterboo. And so now all of a sudden Kansas and Arizona State are the two hottest teams in the Big 12, and they are playing the two top teams in the Big 12 next week. And so it actually is going to be real here at the end. It's not going to be a cakewalk for BYU and Colorado to get to Arlington, Texas.
No, but BYU would have to drop 2, right, to make it interesting. Because does BYU, I can't remember the scenario. The BYU would clinch tonight or would not clinch tonight?
I don't know. I mean, I guess they would. No, I guess they wouldn't. I don't know. I don't know what the 2-loss tiebreakers are. So there's still the chance they could lose 2 and then fall into a tie. But anyway,
they need Arizona State.
It's going to be like, it's still going to be real. For a second there, it felt like, maybe it won't. And then I don't know if we have to reevaluate. I mean, I don't want to do to Kansas State what I said don't do to Pitt, but maybe like the Kansas State team that almost lost at Tulane and the Kansas State team that got blown off the field at BYU, and now the Kansas State team that was down 24-0 to Arizona State is like, maybe they are a little more that than the team that felt like that when you and Ari and I did our playoff thing, like it's only like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, you and I think both had Kansas State in the playoff, and it's like, they are nowhere close to that now. So I don't know if it means a reevaluation of Kansas State, but it's maybe just a little bit more of a Avery Johnson is learning the ropes as a first-year starter than a, hey, Kansas State's ready to go to the playoff kind of season for them. 3 losses now.
Yeah, I think the ceiling, this was kind of a couple years ago where you can get really excited about what the ceiling of Kansas State is, but they've never really gotten close to it. I don't think. And they're just a little too loose with the football, right? Like second play of the game, they turn the ball over, Arizona State scores. 3rd drive of the game or 4th drive of the game, they fumble, Arizona State goes and scores, right? It's just like they can't give the ball away as much as they give the ball away. And because their defense isn't good enough, I don't think, to like bail them out of it as much as they ask them to.
So we had 8 Northern games today where North played North, Colorado beat Utah, Ohio State beat Northwestern, Illinois beat Michigan State as we predicted, but that's still a nice win for Illinois. Penn State beat Purdue, Rutgers beat Maryland, and you thought Ethan Kalak-Manis looked like Dan Marino?
Sometimes if you turn your attention to the television at the right time, he will make a throw that kind of get a little wide-eyed. He had a really nice touchdown throw. I think that gave the Rutgers its 31st points of the game. Yeah, they were good. Kyle Monangai had a nice game. Kalak-Manis threw it pretty well. And that's a big win for Rutgers, as we said during the week, that Maryland had kind of owned that matchup over the last decade. So good win for Rutgers. So they got bowl eligible, right, with that one.
Yep. Iowa State beat Cincinnati, Oregon beat Wisconsin, and Kansas BYU is going on right now. Northern winners this week over non-North teams. Washington beat UCLA on Friday night. That was a nice win for Washington. Not a surprise that they won at home, but they are the most split personality maybe team in the country right now, home and road. But that's a nice senior night win for Washington. Syracuse went out to Cal as like a 10-point underdog and won pretty convincingly. And Kyle McCord said the team gave Fran Brown Old Spice after the game so that he could because winners get to wash themselves. But I would like to reiterate what I said on Thursday, which is, why do I have to think Cal's good? I don't have to now, right?
Yeah, but I don't understand the urge to want to undermine the win, right? That's my problem with people want to say that this team sucks, that team sucks. It's like your team won.
No. I'm against that too. But I don't know why Syracuse was a 10-point underdog to Cal. Like, I think Syracuse is a better team than Cal. So no, I don't want to undermine it.
I mean, Cal gave Pitt everything it could handle on the road. Cal gave Miami a heck of a game. Like, I don't think Cal played particularly well today, but I don't think 10 was a lot, but I don't think it was crazy for Syracuse to be an underdog in Berkeley.
All right, great win by Q's against a powerhouse in Cal. Is that all right? I'll do that. Berkeley.
Why does it have to be on both sides of the spectrum?
You don't just walk into Berkeley.
Why is there no middle ground?
Solid win by Q's. This is a good year. Like, I saw some chart the other day that was like they maybe are like, I don't know if it was by success rate or whatever, but like they might be overachieving what you would expect given some of their statistics. But like, what's that then? I don't know. Coaching, gumption, like, good for them. Good for overachieving. They're having a nice year. Notre Dame beat Virginia, and then our northern losers. Clemson beat Pitt. Baylor beat West Virginia, and you and I were asking if West Virginia should fire the defensive coordinator. It was like, oh yeah, they already did. So I don't know. That's not a great. Baylor kind of had their way, 49-35 in that one. You think it's not
Baylor? Baylor had 7 plays of 20 yards or more. 4 of them were touchdowns, including 3 40-plus yard touchdowns.
And Baylor apparently after the game confirmed that Dave Aranda will be back next year. And he had been on the hot seat previously. And then I don't know if everybody there was just turned to the West Virginia. He was like, "What? You want to say anything?" He was like, "Oh, I sorry, I got to go. I actually, my ride's here. I can't answer that question."
I left the car running. Sorry, I need to leave.
Yeah. USC 28-20 over Nebraska. Kind of what we thought, like a close game, but Jaden Maeva rather than the new offensive coordinator for Nebraska. 20 points is a little bit of a step up for Nebraska.
They had a shot, threw a pick in the end zone at the end. Whereas probably a defensive pass interference it wasn't called to be fair to Nebraska.
Oh, they have. And then Arizona State beat Kansas State and SMU 38-28 over BC. And again, they were kind of in it the whole game. So we'll do a lot of the stuff we didn't cover tonight. We will cover on our Monday show where we, it's just a little more ball talk, a little less shenanigans. But I am really, it's like the playoff realities are really starting to come home to roost, and I'm getting even more excited for it. You can feel it. It's coming, man.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty fired. I was getting fired up during the week when I saw Penn State and Indiana were sending out playoff ticket information to their season ticket holders.
Yeah. And I think this was from our good pal Audrey Snyder, who does a great job covering Penn State. I think this is where I didn't realize this, that the playoff gets the ticket sales, which makes sense, but the home team gets the concessions and the parking, which is a nice little boost. So having a home playoff game is a nice thing for the fans, but it's a little extra boost for the coffers too.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone wins. We like it.
Everyone wins, including us. Okay. Thanks to you guys for being here on a Saturday night. We always appreciate folks hanging out here. Otherwise, we're just two guys shouting into a microphone. We'll be back on Monday. And again, the schedule changed a little bit, but Monday will be pretty typical. Wednesday, huge Ohio State-Indiana breakdown. Thursday, picks and all the other games. And Tuesday, I think I'll be talking to Godfrey and Wetzel on the same day, which is just a little bit of a change. So, and then the next week is Thanksgiving. And just so people know, it's we're not going to do a show on Thanksgiving. We're going to let you eat Thanksgiving dinner. If you're starting to tell your family, hey, it's what time's Thanksgiving dinner? And you're well, it can't be at noon Eastern because that's when Bill and Doug talk. Don't worry about that. Plan your meal because we won't have a live show on Thanksgiving. Nobody would, right? That would be a psychotic thing to do, to have a live show on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no thanks. I don't want to do it. I got a turkey.
Unless we were eating turkey. Unless we were eating while we did it, which also people don't want to hear or watch us eat. All right. That's it for this KOTN Late Night. Thanks to you guys, as always, for being part of it. We will see you on Monday. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was KOTN Late Night on Kings of the North.